Welcome, everyone, to Chefs as Changemakers. How should we educate the next generation? It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Allison Ryder, and our presenter, Taylor Reid.
Hi, everyone. And I are excited to have this opportunity today to share with you the many ways in which CIA is educating the next generation of food industry leaders on important issues related to health and sustainability. Taylor will share some happenings on our campus, and then I will share some recent survey results, and then we'll have a graduating senior join us for an interactive discussion about these topics. So take it away, Taylor.
Thanks, Allison. So there are three things that I'm going to focus on here. Next slide, please. The first is our campus gardens, and the second is our new farm-to-table Hudson Valley concentration. And then the third is our Menus of Change kitchen. In this slide, you can see the way that our gardens have transitioned over the years from gardens that are more formal and managed by our grounds department to gardens where our students are really involved in the process of growing and harvesting food. And you can see that in the teaching garden on the left here. Next slide, please. We also have an apiary garden on campus where students are involved in beekeeping and producing honey. Next slide, please. We have a community garden where students are developing their own plan for gardening, ordering their own seeds, doing all of the management, and growing their own food. Next slide, please. We also have a new shiitake mushroom project, and we now have over 100 inoculated shiitake logs where students are growing gourmet medicinal mushrooms for the kitchens on campus. Next slide, please. And this is our rooftop garden, which is our main production garden on campus. And this is the place where we're able to grow a lot of food for our restaurants. Over the past year, we grew over $7,000 worth of produce for the restaurants on campus. And the rooftop garden is nearly 1/10 of an acre on top of our student recreation center. Next slide, please. So we have had a farm-to-table concentration at our California campus for a number of years. And this past fall, in response to student demand, we've added a new farm-to-table concentration in the Hudson Valley. And we'll be doing that for the second time this fall. Last fall, we had 18 students, and this year we are over full with 19. Next slide, please. This picture is from the first day of advanced cooking. Students take 5 classes in the concentration. It's a way that our bachelor students can focus on a particular cuisine. And in this course, on the first day, they were given a tray of food and asked to develop recipes from it, which is very different from the way that we normally teach cooking classes here. Next slide, please. In the concentration, we also have been visiting a number of our amazing farms and food system operations throughout the Hudson Valley. We spent some time at Blue Hill at Stone Barns, and were able to sit in on a chef's meeting with the gardeners there, which was really amazing. Next slide. This is students getting their hands dirty at Poughkeepsie Farm Project. Next slide. Here, students are moving dairy cows at Sprout Creek Farm. Next slide. And this is one of the culmination pieces to the farm-to-table concentration. Students went to People's Place, which is a food pantry in Kingston. And every week, People's Place gives out fresh food from local farms. The students took that food and developed 4 soup recipes, and then gave out the soup with the recipes at the following event. Next slide, please. And finally, I want to talk for just a moment about our Menus of Change kitchen, which is a new initiative here that is grant funded. And the Menus of Change kitchen supplements our dining program here. And here's our amazing chef, Alex Sarabelli, who ran the Menus of Change kitchen until we had to close in March. And the idea with the kitchen is that it's used to promote Menus of Change principles and to supplement our dining services in a way that allows students to have more choices. Chef Sarabelli always offers vegan and vegetarian options, gluten-free options, and lots of different options for students. Next slide, please. And one of the places that she's really been able to focus is on reducing food waste on campus. And on the left, you can see a refrigerator full of reclaimed food from some of our other kitchens. And then you can see what she's been able to make with that food. And so all of these efforts just highlight our student-driven sustainability focus on our Hyde Park campus. Next slide.
Thanks, Taylor. And to complement all of these amazing sustainability-related initiatives on campus, just in the last year, Taylor and I have partnered with Julia Wolfson from University of Michigan School of Public Health to conduct a survey with our CA students last fall. So we wanted to better understand our students' attitudes towards their potential role in promoting healthy and sustainable eating habits. And we felt like these results would help us in our continued curriculum development in this area, and that they would also be useful to share with you all as their future employers in the industry. So out of over about 2,600 enrolled students last fall across all of our 3 domestic campuses, we had about a 21% response rate on an online survey that covered both open and closed-ended questions. And so I'll share some of our preliminary results today, and then we're going to have a current student join us to share a little bit more about her perspective on these questions. Next slide, please. So starting off, when asking about chefs and nutrition, about 96% of our students agree or strongly disagree that it is important for chefs to learn about nutrition. Great. However, about 54% agree or strongly agree that most chefs actually understand nutrition guidelines for healthy eating. So there's still a little bit of a gap there that we need to fill. Next slide, please. When it comes to chefs' role in promoting healthy eating, there was a bit more of a spread here with this question. So only about 43% of students agreed or strongly agreed that the public looks up to chefs as role models for healthy eating. And Taylor and I are really interested in digging more into the qualitative data around this question to unpack this a little bit. But when we asked about chefs' responsibilities, more than 60% believe that chefs do have an important role and a responsibility to help address obesity and diet-related diseases through their menu decisions and through their roles as leaders. Next slide, please. When asked about chefs and the environmental impact of food, more than 90% of our students agreed or strongly agreed with statements about how important it is for chefs to know where their food is grown, how their food is grown, and to understand the environmental impact of their ingredients. So we felt like that these data were really encouraging here. Next slide, please. When asked about chefs and climate change, we were fascinated by the results here that more than 86% of our students believe that climate change is real and is caused by human activity, but just over 50% agreed with the statement that it is important for people to start eating less meat to address climate change. And in fact, about 21% disagreed with that statement. So perhaps there's still a lack of understanding of the diet climate change connection, or perhaps a lack of willingness to act on this understanding. We need to learn a little bit more about that. But nevertheless, about 67% were in agreement that chefs do have a responsibility to help address climate change through their purchasing and menu decisions. Next slide, please. The last set of questions here, we asked about their agreement with statements about their hopes for their future careers. And as you can see with these three statements, the vast majority of our students agree that they think about healthfulness and environmental impact of food as a primary consideration for their future career. They hope to make nutrition and sustainability a big part of their career and to promote healthy eating and environmentally sustainable local food systems through their work as chefs. So all of this data, we're continuing to do some of the qualitative analysis. We hope to be able to publish a paper about this because we feel like this is an area where there hasn't been a whole lot of research in the literature about current culinary students and how they perceive their role in addressing some of these emerging challenges related to health and sustainability. So what we want to do now is bring on, if you go to the next slide, please, we're going to hand it back over, bring back on Taylor and a student, Leatrice, to talk more about this.
Thanks, Allison. I'm excited to introduce my student, Leatrice Wilson. Before I do, I just want to encourage those of you in the audience, if you have questions about our survey or about our sustainability initiatives on campus, please put them in the chat and we'll try to get to those at the end of the presentation. So Leatrice Wilson is from Queens, New York, and she is in the last semester of her bachelor's program. She's double majoring in culinary science and applied food studies. And in addition to finishing all of her classes online this semester, she's also working full-time at Levon Bakery in Williamsburg. And she's going to be continuing with this company in a new managerial position in Washington, D.C. this fall. She's a member of Eta Sigma Delta Honor Society and is the vice president of the Black Culinarian Society at CIA. Welcome, Leatrice.
Thank you, Dr. Reid.
So what we wanted to do here is to just get some student perspectives on the data that we presented. We're going to ask Leatrice some of the questions that we asked in our survey, and she's going to give you the student perspective on those. So here's the first question, Leatrice. In your opinion, is it appropriate for the public to look up to chefs as role models for healthy and sustainable eating?
Absolutely. I think it's absolutely imperative because chefs are leaders in the food system. We're the ones bringing forth our ideas and our knowledge to the eyes of the public. So if all eyes are on us, it's really our responsibility to just lead by example. And we need to demonstrate that sustainable and healthy eating, they can't be an afterthought when discussing food.
Thanks. And a related question, in your opinion, what's the most important thing that chefs can do to help promote healthy and sustainable eating habits among the public?
I would have to say educating themselves on nutrition and public health, just because, like I said, chefs are leaders in the food industry. We really can't afford to be ignorant because our choices are seen by the world and thus they impact the world. And we can't ask the public to care about sustainability and wellness before we decide to commit to it ourselves.
Great. Beatrice is also currently enrolled in a project in applied food studies course where she's investigating the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on food insecurity in her community. So I'm wondering, Leatrice, if you could tell us just a little bit about your project, what you've been doing, and what you've learned so far from the things that you've been doing in your own community.
Sure. So directly, I've been working with a pantry discussing basically how their processes have changed pre-COVID and post-COVID. And I've also been in contact with a few other pantries, just overall just trying to collect data on their experiences as much as I can. And all of this data is really just helping me understand how food inequality is, I guess, being addressed, during COVID. And this is important to understand because during a pandemic, obviously things are more stressful. There's a lot more duress. So it's interesting to see how much these systems have changed, these processes have changed, and who's being affected by them.
Do you have a sense of what the pantries are doing differently in terms of working with volunteers? Do they have more volunteers? Do they have less volunteers? What are the protocols that the food pantries are using?
Right. So there's been a lot less volunteering. People are afraid to come outside. They're afraid to interact with the public. So volunteers are really difficult to come by. And there, as far as protocol is concerned, it's become a lot more rigorous, a lot more, strict. Like they haven't been accepting a lot of produce from home gardens and uncertified gardens and things like that. And they haven't been accepting a lot of donations. So during this time, we've seen a big spike in the amount of people needing these donations, but a drop in the amount of donations, which is clearly causing a big rift.
And what about demand? How has demand been affected by the pandemic in your area? Do you have a sense of that from the food pantry that you've been working with?
For sure. Their demand has increased exponentially. Like they went from serving maybe 80 to 100 clients in a week to serving more than 300. And that's really intense,
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how they're coping. And I know that a lot of people are still struggling to be food secure. But this is the situation right now, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So it seems like we're getting some comments in the chat from the audience members as well that perhaps we can address too. So there's a comment, a little bit of question too about just some of the harsh realities as a chef that, pay rent and undocumented line cooks and abusive customers and all these things. So at the end, if all we want to do is be a part of this education, how can chefs manage it all? I think it is a big ask for chefs. Any thoughts on that, Leatrice, as you are preparing to go into this industry?
I think that there's always going to be challenges as a person who's a chef. Like you can't cherry pick which challenges to address. If you're going to be a good chef, you kind of have to address them all. And sustainability and equality, that's a part of that. It can't be an afterthought. It can't be left to the side to think about later. We all are here because we love food, but we have to love people too because we're serving food to people. So I think that it just can't be something that you just put to the back of your mind and worry about later.
Very well said. Thank you. And so Lori, another audience member, excited to hear about our farm to table and menus of change kitchen projects. We're very excited too. What recommendations do you have for bringing a farm to table focus to a 2-year culinary program in community colleges that may have different resources than us? Maybe Taylor, this is a question that you can talk a little bit about since you have experience from another college sort of building up farm to table programs too.
Yeah, but I came here 2 years ago from Tompkins Cortland Community College in Dryden, New York, where I was the chair of a sustainable farming and food systems program. And that college had its own farm, and it had a specific program focusing on food and sustainability. But I think community colleges and 2-year culinary colleges there are some smaller steps that they can take to start to get students involved in these issues. And in my experience, these initiatives are always most effective if they're student driven rather than faculty led. If students go to the administration and say, we want a community garden on campus, where can we do that? This is something that's really important to us. It tends to carry more weight than if faculty come and say, it's important for our students to have a community garden. And I think that's a good place to start, with gardens on campus and grow from there. I work with beginning farmers a lot, and I always tell them, start small, figure out what works, and then grow those aspects of your farm that work. And I think the same thing, the same piece of advice can apply for culinary colleges or community colleges that are interested in doing more farming and food-focused programs. Start small. Start with a class or with a garden or with a class that's focused on a garden, better yet. And then build the curriculum around that. And always make sure that students are included in the process of building those programs and those processes. I think that really is super important. And from what we're seeing at CIA, students are more and more interested and excited about doing this kind of stuff. They want to have their hands in the dirt. That's very clear to us here. It's clear from our survey, and it's clear from the student-driven initiatives that we've been able to promote here at the Hyde Park campus.
And I think too, to build on that, Taylor, a lot of the course work that you have described, so our farm to table concentration, is geared towards our bachelor's program, and which reaches only a small percentage of our overall student body. And we have, a large percentage of students that are here just for their 2-year associate's degree. And I think that's been, one of our big challenges is to look at our culinary curriculum and look at ways that we don't have to start a new class, but what are ways that we can integrate sustainability across the culinary curriculum? And we're starting to get more buy-in. We certainly have support from the Dean of Culinary Arts and from various faculty members that are already doing that in very subtle ways of, within our fish class, talking about sustainable seafood purchasing, within meats being exposed to sustainable meat cuts and local farms. So I wonder, Leatrice, maybe just in your experience going through our culinary arts courses, what little pieces of sustainability did you see being threaded throughout the curriculum? Or maybe if not, what opportunities do you see for us to continue to improve in that area?
So while you were asking this question, I think what came to mind initially was when I was in baking and pastry fundamentals, and how we really didn't have a lot of autonomy as to what we were making and where the food was coming from. And, that makes sense. You're starting out, so you don't really get many choices in the beginning, which is fine. But I think there really does need to be a little bit more work done on that front, and giving students an opportunity to see where the food is coming from, not just putting it on the table in front of them and telling them to make it. I think that we need to bridge that gap, because there's too many students that just have this idea that, food just comes in front of them and they don't have to work for it. It doesn't come from anywhere. And that needs to change. We have a garden, we have access to these things. There's no reason why we can't take 1 class day, maybe 2 class days, to just introduce AOS students to the garden and introduce them to the apiary, that kind of thing. We're using those products anyway, so it doesn't take anything away from the class to show them where it's coming from.
Yeah, and maybe that's a good transition, Taylor, too, if you mentioned just a little bit about our Intro to Food Systems class. And I think that connects to Barry's comment in the chat here about what about bringing the class to the farm. And I think our Intro to Food Systems class is a way that we can do that in the associates program. So maybe it's not the students while they're in the kitchens, but one of our intro courses does allow the opportunity to do these sort of walking tours. Taylor, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Intro to Food Systems is a class that we integrated into the AOS program in culinary arts, I think 3 or 4 years ago. It replaced a class called Product Knowledge, which is easier to learn about online now. And it was important, I think, to have a class that connected the kitchen to the rest of the world. And that class covers issues like climate change, food waste, soil, agriculture, animal farming, and lots of other issues that are related to the kitchen but are outside of the kitchen. And one of the things we try to do in that class, and I've had lots of students that were really excited to visit farms, It's challenging to do in an hour and 20-minute class period because it's hard to get everybody out somewhere where you can actually see something. But we do take tours of the campus gardens. That's one of the reasons that I think it's so important to have these projects on campus. The shiitake project, the apiary, the rooftop garden. So students can get a little bit of a taste, get a little bit of experience. And the students that are really excited about it can take a leadership role and be much more involved in these projects and in these processes. And I think food systems is also, it's a great place to start incorporating sustainability into the curriculum. And we now have a bachelor's program in applied food studies, and a lot of the courses in that program are sustainability focused, and all of them are integrated in a way that helps students to see themselves as change makers. And my experience here is that there are a lot of aspiring chefs who want to do more than just get a job in a kitchen. They want to make change in the food system. They want to be part of the changes that need to happen in our society. And so that's,
I think that's a great transition point, just to give Leatrice the final word here as we wrap up in the next couple of minutes. Leatrice, do you want to share a little bit about what your aspirations are as you graduate here shortly with us from the CIA?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm passionate about a lot of things, of course, but I think I'm most passionate about food inequality and sustainability. More than anything, like as Dr. Reid put it, like I want to be a part of the movements and the change that help address these things. And I can't say exactly like which avenue I want to, take to address these issues just yet, but I know that I have a lot of options and at my disposal, and I'm really looking forward to exploring each one of them.
Excellent. So I know I'll hand it back over to Patty to help us wrap up.
Thank you so much, everyone. I want everyone to stay tuned. We're going to have our panelists give us their top takeaways in 6 words or less. I'm just going to share some brief details about our upcoming break. First, I'd like to thank Land O'Lakes, our break sponsor. And we have a special presentation in Sessions by Land O'Lakes, Sensory Evaluation. If you look on the left, our networking tab, we have the opportunity for 4-minute video chats. And in our event chat, you can look for the question of the week. And be sure to visit our Expo sponsors booths, where we have culinary demonstrations, trends presentations, and insightful videos. And this week, we have Hooni Kim and David Katz in our Meet the Author booth. And finally, don't forget the raffle. Engage during the breaks for opportunities to win cookbooks. And if you engage all 6 weeks, you have the opportunity to win free registration and travel to our Hyde Park campus for the 2021 Menus of Change. And Allison, I'm going to start with you. Your top takeaways for today's presentation in 6 words or less.
CIA students care about these issues.
Beatrice, your top takeaways?
Hold yourself accountable for making change.
Great. Taylor?
Future chefs will change the world.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for a wonderful presentation. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody back later. And everyone enjoy the break. Thank you.
Thank you.